the victory, and you guys campaigned so long and so hard on behalf of all of us, not just in the United Kingdom, but frankly around the world, who have had to try and tolerate this absolute rubbish. And yet Phillipson thinks it's okay to just ride roughshod over it. I mean, I just think this is hamstringing women. It's putting them back in a dangerous situation, because we know that men would, try and get into our spaces anyway. They're too emboldened now. They've got used to it. They like being challenging. I think they do it to be anarchic, quite frankly, and to make people uncomfortable. And so I think a great many people would just still carry on doing what they did before. And now she's turned around and said, well, whatever you do, don't ask anybody about their gender.
I don't think the code's saying that, actually, because it does say quite specifically that you can ask people about their sex, and that there are justifications for doubting someone's sex, and that's based on the things you would assume, like their appearance and how they talk and their anatomy. So I think if you have a good reason to say that's a bloke over there, I don't think there's any issue. It's a very odd line in the code about not sometimes not needing to ask, but I think that's probably because most of the time we don't need to ask. We just know who's male and who's female. So I don't think anybody should be deterred by this. I think fundamentally what that code says is that men shouldn't be in women's spaces, and if you think they are, you have the right to tell them to get out.
Okay, that is good. That is more reassuring. I mean, the guidance states it's unlikely to be either practical or appropriate to approach any particular individual to make inquiries about their sex in relation to facilities such as toilets. It's still a bit unclear to me, but the problem I have is what happens now if a man does just saunter into women's toilets and the women say, "Excuse me, are you a woman?" And what you see a lot of them doing is they just go, they sort of, swagger on in because they want to upset women, frankly, and will, just ignore women anyway. What then? Where does that leave us? Do these people get in trouble with the law?
Yeah, I think the thing about, it might not be appropriate. I think that's probably going back to this whole stupid transactivist argument about how are you going to police toilets? Are you going to have, they always like to say, are you going to have genital inspectors? I mean, I think probably what it's saying is you do not need to have somebody at the door saying, and what is your sex? And yes, you can go in there, you go in there. But if somebody walks in who is clearly and obviously a man, and they're a man, you actually don't need to ask their sex. You can just go, oi, get out.
Right, but what are the repercussions if they say no?
Well, I think I think again in the code, it does make it clear that you have got the ability to tell them to go if you have due grounds for. And look, we all know what sex people are. It's very, very rare that we are mistaken on somebody's sex. And the code also gives provision for those cases where you might have women who have taken a lot of testosterone who might make other women uncomfortable in a space, that service providers can have facilities whereby they say, no, it's not appropriate for you to be in a women-only space as well. So I think, in general, it's doing the right things, but I think perhaps some of the language is a bit confusing, and what concerns me is that perhaps some of the transactivists will jump on that and try to exploit it and go down this route of, oh, you can't tell, how will you know? Which, of course, is the argument they've made for so long. And it obscures the fact that everybody knows what sex they are. We all know what sex we are, and we need to start to be honest about that and to understand that other people in society have rights, and transactivists for so long have decided that women don't have rights and they can have spaces at will.
I mean, what I want to understand about this guidance is it's given women the right to ask the question, and that is good. I mean, it's ridiculous that was up for grabs anyway, quite frankly. But what I want to know is if you have men who are flagrantly flouting the laws, being provocative, will they face any sort of prosecution? What is their punishment? Because once upon a time, if a bloke in a frock went into a girl's changing rooms, he'd probably be arrested for voyeurism. I just have a feeling that even though we've got this now, which protects us being able to ask the question or to make a demand, a bit like the Darlington nurses, that won't come to pass in, hopefully in a hospital with nurses changing rooms ever again. But I just, my worry is this stuff has got so baked in that I don't know if people flouting the rules are going to face any kind of repercussions.
No, I think that's a real worry, because you're right. A man going into a women's changing room, they're going to be going in there for purposes of voyeurism or exposure, and that is a crime, and it should be dealt with accordingly. But unfortunately, I think there has been this real rollback and this fear, especially with people in authority like the police, and they won't take action against these people. So I think, on an individual basis, it's going to be very hard to know what's going to happen to them, because obviously the code can't cover that, because the code is about service providers, so it's their responsibility. If you know that your gym is allowing men into the female changing room, you can ask the EHRC to take action against the gym, but the EHRC can't take action against the individual. So that is going to be something that I think will have to be a broader point that comes out of this, how authorities are going to deal with these individuals who constantly transgress.
Well, my worry is, and we didn't bring you on to talk about this, but as you're on, I wouldn't mind asking you if you're across this story, because I think this is appalling. This is the case of a teenage gang who lured little girls, tinies, 15 and 13, into an underpass, raped them, filmed it, laughed as they filmed it, and the judge prosecuting the pair basically said, "Oh, you've behaved so well. Oh, you haven't done anything bad before." He basically let him off, as far as I can tell. And I just think, this is madness. This is madness. Women, girls are not protected until we start seeing prosecutions for men encroaching in their spaces, assaulting them, attacking them. We need to see real punishments. And you know, sort of carries on from what I was saying about if a man in a dress goes into women's toilets, what are going to be the consequences to him? Well, in this particular case, and I know they're young kids, but you know, what they did was utterly sickening and vile. They essentially got let off. Lucy Connolly was sentenced to 31 months in prison for a tweet or whatever it was, a post on Facebook. These kids who have laughed while filming, raping tiny girls, nothing.
I wasn't aware of that case, but that certainly sounds absolutely abhorrent. I think there's a real issue with how sexual assault generally is treated in society. We know that most rapes are not prosecuted, and we do have all these ridiculous standards about women being told, well, what were you wearing, were you drunk, all this sort of thing. And I think there's a real issue with what we're feeding young children in school. You know, they are getting access to pornography. We really need to be clamping down on all of that sort of thing. And safeguarding, and this does come back to what we're talking about, you know, this is about safeguarding. It's assaults need to be stopped before they happen, because it's no good. And so many people say this. I have come across politicians who will say this when we're talking about women-only spaces. They go, oh, well, if somebody does something wrong, they can be prosecuted. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the woman who's been assaulted. We need to stop those things happening before they occur, because otherwise you've got traumatized women. There was the case this week with the trans-identified woman who thought she was a man, who was put in the men's ward at the hospital, the psychiatric hospital in Maudsley, and she was raped within an hour. Now, that hospital failed in their duty of care to her, because it doesn't matter what she thought her identity was. It doesn't matter that she thought she was a man. They should have said that is not a safe place for that woman to be. So we need people to start taking safeguarding seriously again.
I totally agree that actions should have consequences. And like I keep saying, lanyards kill. Susan, thank you ever so much. Thank you as ever for your hard work. And I'm pretty sure as the prosecutions do or do not roll in the wake of this, we'll catch up again and, do a little litmus test on how well things are going.